Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new episode of our program, From Inner Suffering to Inner Joy. Our
Yes.
friends Tanya and Pedro are here. I'm sorry, Tanya. With us, obviously. Tanya, how are you today?
Oh, yes. I'm just saying inner suffering to inner joy. Just makes me say yes. Happy to be back here with you, Angel, and with you, Pedro, to continue the invitation to this incredible exploration together.
Absolutely new name because we have to confess to everyone that the very first episode we didn't have the name yet, but Pedro helped us. And well, now Pedro, how are you doing today?
All good, Angel. Thank you for having us again. Delighted to be here and ready to start exploring the inner landscapes, the inner
Yes.
lands.
Yes, I see you very busy lately with all the IFS work. I just want you to know that I am thoroughly delving into it as well.
Very
So,
busy. Very happy to
well,
be doing that.
yeah, that's very. No, seriously, you're motivating me. Like I'm reading, and you're bringing some other concepts that I'm taking notes. Because here, like I have one that I wrote. Um, something about memory reconsolidation, like something
Yes.
that I wrote that note that I need to start reading about it. But
Yes.
anyways, so we're gonna get started. And I want to invite you, Tanya and Pedro, pretty much to start from the very beginning. Like why do we practice self inquiry? And Tanya,
Yeah.
if you allow me, I would love
Yes.
to start with you.
I want to tell the world to explore practicing self inquiry because we deserve to really align ourselves with joy because that's our birthright, and to know what it means to be in full integrity. I love the word integrity because it means together as one. And what do we mean by that? That there's an alignment with the mind, the heart, and the body. And to do that, we need to explore our internal world. And, we've been diving into the IBC and IFS combination recently to be able to access those parts of us that have been abandoned through tough experiences, through trauma, through survival mechanism, coping mechanisms that we need to somehow recover to reharmonize our internal world to achieve that integrity so we can make it a peace movement. Because again, peace in the world, which is so needed and so wanted, will only happen when we learn to have peace internally. And that is not easy. We need methodologies that are tried, true, powerful in order to do that, because we get confused and we think that we are the parts that suffer, but the parts that suffer when we are suffering is not who we are. It's just pieces that we need to access, to understand and love, to reintegrate back into our system.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm saying all of this, but the short version is, if we want true joy, if we want true peace, we need to do our internal work. And this is why it's so important.
Exactly. And many years ago in one of your workshops, Tanya, like something became crystal clear to me. And the other day when you and I also were talking about human and peace in the planet, right? So what became clear to me was the fact that prior to connecting with those around us and with the world, it is paramount to connect with ourselves first, with our
Yes.
internal experience.
Yes, and we've heard this, Angel, from all the teachers. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. Well, that universe is internal. You know how there are mythology tells us about different gods, and which in the psychological philosophical world are symbols of emotions and parts of ourselves. And these have been around. These stories have been around, and if we take those as a metaphor of what happens internally, we have this Greek pantheon of gods inside of us, this Nordic pantheon of gods inside of us, in forms of parts that sometimes struggle together, sometimes suffer inside. And if we would have been taught since we were little that these are not only from this lifetime, but we also inherit from our generational patterns, part of these patterns and traits, it would be amazing if we would have been taught to learn to talk to them, understand them, be present for them, so that we can have internal harmony. And we're not taught that. So it's like we've abandoned ourselves. So what you say, it's true. If we want to start to be really belong in the world and be solidary and really helpful, we need to stop abandoning ourselves.
Yes.
Parts that suffer.
Yes. Tanya, wow, like exactly. This is why I wanted to share that, because I learned that from you many years ago. Mm-hmm. And so, in terms of connection, Pedro, I would like to bring the microphone now back to you. There is a chapter on your book that you make like very powerful questions, and it is about this. You call it this natural phenomena that many of us go through years without the awareness of the impact of our internal conversation. And so you make questions of who asks, who's responding, who's taking the decisions. And I feel that it is important that right now I ask you this because of everything that Tanya was sharing a few moments ago, right? All these different parts, all these different identities, that it's not that they get on the way, but they truly have an impact, right? So do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I would actually say that they do get in the way in terms of our ability to access our original true zero space, our original true center. As we grow up, these identities, these internal identities, start taking extreme roles because of these situations, the circumstances, and the trauma we go through. And they learn early on that to support the system, they need to be very weary about something in particular, or a certain tone of voice, or certain people that look like this or like that, or they need to be really scared of certain noises or certain sounds. For example, I have a reaction to people walking on wooden stairs, because I got very afraid with someone in my younger years walking down the stairs, for example, and these parts really get these very clear roles that they take very seriously. And back, I don't know, 10 years ago when I wrote my book, that was a true question for me. You know, who's asking the question, and then who answers, and then who replies, and then who counter replies, and then who brings in the other perspective and the other debate, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we now know, thank goodness, is that this inner world that Tanya was making reference to is as sophisticated and as complicated as a living, breathing inner community of identities. We call them parts that have their own, each of them have their own set of values, history. They can be perceived very clearly when we do this work internally. And going back to the issue around them, the parts getting in the way of who we truly are, it's because they're so innocently are trying to help with the resources and the mindset that they acquired when we were very young, right? So the issue we're having is that we have all these parts that are trying to save us, that have very limited resources because they didn't have the level of understanding, maturity, resources, and power that we now have and they got so entrenched in their roles that it's very difficult for them to let go and trust the adult in the room, or the higher self, or the zero space that we're embodying, right? So as we do that, we've clarified what are all these voices and why is it that sometimes it's such a chaotic experience. And instead of trying to get rid of them, which is the approach that many spiritual traditions take, ignoring them, coming back to breath, not paying attention, thanking them, but coming back, right? By ignoring them, we're not going to get anywhere. They're just going to grow stronger and stronger, and the stronger they grow, the noisier they will become, the louder they will get, because they're trying to get our attention, because they want to heal. So those are the famous experiences of polarization and tension and voices and dialogue that we have in our minds.
Yes, incredibly interesting. Yeah. So right now, you brought me, when you were talking about the parts, of course, that other chapter of your book where you talk about the skippers, the different identities. And so thank you very much, Pedro, for sharing this. And what this brings me to my mind is the fact that then, Tania, for us to be able to connect with all these parts that Pedro was just stating, that many of them were formed at early ages of our life, we have a tool, a very powerful tool that it consists on powerful questions that allow us to connect, I want to say, peacefully and responsibly with the different parts that integrate our system. And well, in your case, Tania, you develop IBC, of course.
Yes, we co-developed it. Actually, Pedro was the main alchemist there, and I was supporting the whole process. The IBC questions are an incredible tool to really ask, and this is the most important thing, that we create a separation between consciousness and parts. So when we are suffering, we believe that it's us and it's just our whole being that's suffering. So IBC is designed to create a separation of consciousness and the part that's suffering. So what we do is, first, when we start to ask the questions, are you willing to be wrong about this issue? Are you willing to be vulnerable, uncomfortable, humble? And then we go into the full IBC format, which consists of, how do you validate? How is it that your consciousness makes this situation or this suffering that way? And what identity does the part turn into when you're actually immersed in this suffering? This is very important. And then the other part of IBC is then being able to make even a broader distance and say, okay, so when I have this identity and I make this suffering true for these reasons, is there any chance that I might be exaggerating? Is there any chance that I'm needing something else, or that I'm disconnecting? So we can actually start to see the suffering not as one with us, but as a perception of consciousness. So the consciousness needs separation in order to understand itself. Isn't that interesting? That is like a paradox, because we would say consciousness needs proximity, but consciousness actually needs separation, right?
Space.
And then what we want to create with IBC is that then we understand what is it that is available apart from the reasons that we think are the reasons we're suffering. What else is available from our zero space, from ourself, from consciousness, from the world? What is available? What could we be missing in order for this suffering to dissolve? And then we can start to see suffering or difficult situations as gifts, as opportunities for growth. And we see that suffering actually takes a role of teacher. Instead of a role of avoiding, It takes the role of super teacher that wants to support us. So we start to actually not be so scared of suffering in that way. And that is a huge, 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 big gift, because instead of running away from suffering, we get curious and we get present with it. And that is so powerful, because then we get the clarity where, after we go through the process, we get the clarity of what steps we need to take. But the thing is, Angel, I'm explaining this to you very quickly. What I would invite everybody that's listening to this that feels a little bit curious is to experience it. Experience it with an innerland coach, experience it with you, experience it with anybody that's trained, so they can actually get a full experience of what it feels to unblend and dissolve from the things that create the suffering.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Tanya. And I would like to, before we go, I would like to go back with you to the analogy that you were using for like the Greek mythology. Okay, so don't let me forget about that. Okay, Pedro, I would like to go back to one of the conference that I attended of you. Same thing a few months ago, and it made me nervous because you stated that we go through life creating algorithms while interacting and connecting with those around us, right? So like if A and B happens, then C, this is what this is, then C applies, right? And so the problem with algorithms you mentioned on that day, that is that we made them out of things that are not real. Can you recall that?
Mhm.
Okay, and so I just would like to take you there because you were explaining to all of us about all the parts that integrate us, and I
Mhm.
feel that we would love to hear
Well,
about that.
let me correct myself then a little bit. I think algorithms are programmed or set. Well, what's an algorithm first? An algorithm is an assumption. If A and B happens, then C should happen or must happen, or I expect it to happen. And we do create these algorithms, these models of interacting with the world through lived experience. And in most cases, we do create them because we're going through difficult times, difficult situation, a traumatic situation. What is not real is that the mind assumes that every other time, if A and B are present, that means that C is going to happen.
Mhm.
That's the assumption. That's what's false. And in many cases, because we've experienced trauma in the past, in many cases we go about life reacting disproportionately to A's and B's when we bump into them because we assume C is going to happen, right?
Correct.
So this is how the brain is wired, and how we build these algorithms. And what we're now discovering, and this is something that points to the theme that you were saying before, memory reconsolidation, is that all these models that work so well, that have so much transformational power, like IBC, like IFS, and many others, they work because they have the ability to go back in experience to that original moment when the algorithm was created, A and B, that means C has to happen, right? And update the algorithm to a more reasonable, a more mature, a more enlightened, a more clear, a more self-driven, um, supportive and resourced experience that has nothing to do with the original trauma. And the way that memory reconsolidation works is you connect experientially, internally, with the lived experience of the traumatic event. For example, you go back to the memory of something traumatic happening to you, and then you find that in your body. You get a felt sense of it. You identify, the different characteristics. You activate the memory, and then what you do is you bring new, verifiable evidence around what is that for you today. 20 years later, 30 years later, and you hold both experiences in your body, in your consciousness at the same time. And one of the very interesting things that we notice when we're doing that is that in order to bypass the amygdala, the reactive
Of our
algorithm
brain.
reaction, we stay in that holding of those two worlds at the same time for at least 20 seconds. And that allows the I don't like to call it the slower brain, but it's I would say the smarter brain, the higher brain, the more sophisticated brain to go, there's a discrepancy here. Something's not quite, we create this dissonance that forces our brain to actually actualize with the new information. And it literally erases past trauma and embeds the new information from a perspective of a mature, more enlightened, more connected, more aligned, and more compassionate person that we are now. So IBC has that unique ability. When you get to that point where you ask yourself, when I'm assuming that A and B equals C, what am I not able to see? What do I miss? What am I not able to see about life, about myself, about others, about the people that I interact with, the people that I'm afraid of, the situations I'm nervous about? What do I miss? And you open up to this inquiry that actually blows all your assumptions away and presents you with new verifiable evidence of what is actually going on for you in your life. So you don't need to keep repeating the trauma and the algorithms again and again. And if we stabilize that experience for more than 20 seconds, our own nervous system starts updating naturally. And the more we do that with someone that supports us, especially if trauma has been a difficult thing to manage, the more wonderful and better results we get.
Yes, and most importantly, just like what Tanya was also sharing, that there are opportunities, and with what you were also stating, we're not able to see them when we have that mask on, right? And so the IVC takes us there. Like, it seems that it becomes a clear course of action, and thank you very much for such a scientific answer, Pedro. That was
My
a lot
pleasure,
of fun. I'm gonna have to watch this video again to take some notes. Thank you very much, Pedro. So, Tanya, I really want to go back to more of a philosophical approach here, and issues that you were mentioning the Greek mythology.
Yeah.
And since our program is just coming to an end,
Yeah.
I would like for you to remind us, all of us, how there's possibly this dark side, or the other day I read that Jung calls it the shadow, right?
Yeah.
You have an amazing analogy in which you use the sun. And please, if you don't mind sharing that with us, because I think it is important that all of us understand that, yeah, that can be part of us, but it is our job to integrate it.
Yes, I think we need to always look at the world, nature, mythology, these gifts as a mirror of what happens inside of us. So, for example, if we take the sun will always have, from a certain angle, will always create a shadow. There's not a possibility that the sun will not, in its reflection and its light, create some shadow. And that shadow has wisdom. In the shadow, there are things that grow, like fungi, like certain plants that are necessary for the whole ecosystem. So when we are talking about ourselves and our shadow, and the shadow would be those difficult parts of us, or the parts of us that we don't like, we invite people. This is something I'm very passionate about at Innerland, that we understand that they're there for a reason. And it's not to become a purist of getting rid of them, but rather understanding their role in our system, in our internal ecosystem. They have so much wisdom, and they have a clear hunger. They point to what we're hungry for. For example, in relationships, when relationships get stagnant, or somebody feels like they're dying within a relationship and that they look things outside, that is a pointer of pieces of themselves that they need to feed and be hungry. And they can feed it in many ways, with friends, with relationships, with works, with things like that. We should never assume that any part that has an active shadow is negative, but rather it's part of what comes with the light.
Yes.
And if we condemn things, and we say, oh, but you did it wrong, oh, but you were so bad, oh, but you weren't there for me, oh, but you were this, and then you said this, and you say that, and we just condemn it, and we see it from a perspective of blaming and shaming and making the other person feel bad, we're not understanding the innocence of the shadow and the wisdom that it brought. So what I want to finish is to invite people to be more curious and more inquisitive, do more inquiry on those shadow parts of ourselves that perhaps have been difficult. And I encourage them through IBC and through all the amazing experiences we offer at Innerland to explore the opportunities that those have brought them into their life as well.
Thank you very much. Wonderful invitation, Tania. One that all of us have to consider, even to all of us that we're already practicing this. There is just so much gold in each exercise. So thank you very much for the invitation, Tania. Pedro, your final words. How would you like to say bye to all of us?
Well, my final words would be: there is nothing more important than this. There is nothing more important than this self-work, than this experience of getting to know ourselves, of giving ourselves the opportunity to heal internally, to liberate our internal wounds, to get everything, all the things that get in the way from our true self, our true light, our true manifestation in this world, to be healed, to be transformed. There is nothing more important. That's my main hope for everybody today, that they realize the importance of this inner transformation. And because there's nothing more important than this, that you go ahead and venture into actually that exploration. Human personal transformation modalities have been moving from the theoretical model into the experiential model. What do I mean by that? The theoretical model is, okay, you need to understand how this happens, et cetera, et cetera. And the exploration model is literally, you can imagine me inviting you, Angel, to come up here to Vancouver, grab a couple of backpacks, and go out there onto an island and literally explore the island. Go to the island. Start walking in the island, get to know, where are the cliffs and where are the streams and where are the rocks and where are the creeks, and in that direct experience with the island, start interacting with people that live in the island. And the island is the analogy for our inner world. It's not about thinking about the island. It's about going to the island and noticing what's going on in the island, and noticing how different things react, and which parts are active and which parts are not. So that's my invitation for everyone. There's nothing more important than this. And when I say this, I'm speaking particularly about the experiential aspect of inner transformation, not thought-based, not theory-based, not abstract, but internal, direct experience of who we are.
Yes, exactly. Like, to all of those that are watching us, for sure, you don't have to believe any of the words that the three of us were sharing here. Is more of the experience of the process that will allow to all this understanding to live within ourselves. Tania and Pedro, thank you very much. An amazing and very interesting conversation with the two of you one more time. Thank you very much for your support. And to all of you guys watching us, please come back next week because we have more chats with Tania and Pedro. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angel.
And I'm sorry, we have to mention the name of our program, which is From Inner Suffering to Inner Joy.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.